about the Spring Boot, okay? And then we covered some topics for data structure in Java. So first I will explain you about the some Spring Boot. What is the Spring Boot? Okay, so first I will share my screen. Today I will give you only the introduction and uh, give a basic information about the Spring Boot and Spring MVC. And in the next session, we will try some making some REST APIs, okay, with using Spring Boot. Okay, so Spring Boot is a like a framework that simplifies that s- simplifies the development of Java-based applications. Okay, like especially web applications and microservices. Microservices means API. Okay, it is built on top of the Spring frameworks and provides a stream limited way to create stand alone product grade applications with minimal configuration. Like I will break down what is Spring Boot is and how it work. Okay, and what each of its components does in detail. Okay, so first is the what is Spring Boot. So Spring Boot is a framework that makes it easy to create Spring-based applications. It eliminates the need for manual configuration and boilerplate code. Okay, allowing developers to focus on writing business logics. It's widely used for like building web applications, REST APIs, microservices, standalone applications. Okay, some advantage of Spring Boots like it help create a standalone Spring applications, embedded Tomcat, Jetty and Undertow directly. No need to deploy war files. Yeah. War means like app setting.json files, etc. It provide opinionated starter POMs to simplify your Maven configuration. Automatically configure Springs whenever possible. It provides production-ready features such as matrix health check and externalized configuration. Absolutely no code generation and no requirement for XML configuration. Okay, like it's not requirement for the JSON configuration. Okay, by it has by default support of JSON. Okay, so the next is like why we use Spring Boot. The interviewer asked you why we use Spring Boot. So before Spring Boot, setting up a Spring applications required a lot of manual configuration. Like example, setting up XML files, configuration bins, etc. Okay. Spring Boot simplifies the process by providing like this auto configuration. Auto configures your application based on the dependencies you add. Dependencies means like when you inject your database, inject any other packages, okay, that called dependency injection, DI. Embedded services, no need to deploy your application on external server. It comes with embedded servers like Tomcat, Jetty, or Undertow, and like production ready features. Okay, it has production ready features, include tools for monitoring health check and metrics, and opinionated like defaults provides sensible defaults for configurations which can be overridden if needed. Okay, so like some core components of Spring Boots and their roles. Like so Spring Boot is a starters. Like starters are dependency descriptors that simplify the inclusion of related dependency. They are like pre-packaged sets of dependencies for specific functionalities. Like instead of manually adding individual dependencies like Spring MVC. MVC means model view and controller. Okay, where exist model view and controller. Models means our entity and entity, like a class where we include the columns name of our database. Okay, controller where you write the business and your logical code, and view means where you write the your HTML and UI code. So Spring MVC, JSON, Tomcat, you can add a single starter and it will include all the required dependencies for that functionalities. Okay, some like for the example of starters have Spring Boot for building application and RESTful APIs. Okay, and Spring Boot starter data JPA for working with database using JPA. JPA means Java Persistence API. Persistence API. Sorry. Spring Boot starter sec- security means for adding security features like authentication and authorization. Okay, so it is part of identity. Spring Boot starter test for testing your application with tools like JUnit and Mockito. Okay, so the next is the like auto configuration. Okay, this is a dependency code. Okay, DI. Okay, so authentication it is a process or action of verifying the identity of a user or process that who are you. And next is the authorization. It is a process of checking the authority of a user to perform actions in the applications. That what are you allowed to do? The authorization check your roles. Okay, what roles assign you? Like Spring Boot automatically configure your application based on the dependencies persist in the class path. Okay, okay. So W3 school cannot have proper. Documentation of for the Spring Boot. If you include the Spring Boot server web dependencies, Spring Boot will automatically configure an embedded Tomcat server and set up a web application environment. So Tomcat is like a package or a server. Okay. If you include the Spring Boot starter data, JPA dependency, Spring Boot will automatically configure a data source and JPA related bins. And the next question, this is important for interview. Okay, interviewer always ask some questions about the Spring Boot and Spring MVC. Like interviewer ask is it useful? Then it eliminates the need for manual configuration, saving times and reduce errors. Okay. How does it work? Like Spring Boot use annotations, okay, to scan the class path and configure. Okay, this is the simple syntax for the bin. Spring Boot Equator. So Equator is a module in Spring Boot that provides production-ready features like health check, metrics, and monitoring. Like it helps you monitor and manage your applications in production environment. For example, you can check the health of your application using the health endpoint. You can view application metrics like memory usage, thread counts, etc. using the metric endpoints. Okay, it show the health status of applications, display application metrics, provides custom application information, and list all the bins in the application context. Okay, so next is the embedded services. Spring Boot applications come with embedded services. This means you don't need to deploy your applications on an external server. It can run as a standalone application. Yes. So you can package your application as a jar file and run it anyway. No need to install and configure an external server when you're using the Tomcat server. Okay, when you include the Spring Boot starter web dependencies, Spring Boot automatically includes an embedded Tomcat server. You can change the server by excluding Tomcat and adding a different server dependencies. Okay, like next is the Spring Boot CLI. The CLI means command line interface. Okay, so the Spring Boot CLI is a tool that allows you to quickly develop Spring applications using Groovy script. Okay. It's great for prototyping and quick development. You can write simply Groovy scripts and Spring Boot CLI will automatically compile and run them. For the example, you can create a simple RESTful API with just a few lines. Okay, you can write simply grow scripts and Spring Boot CLI with automatically compile and run them. For example, you can create a simple REST API with just a few lines in Groovy codes. Okay, like you make a class and call some methods like get mapping, string hello, etc. Okay, it has some like Java has some application properties. So what are properties? I will brief introduction to you. So let's explore it. Then Spring Boot use the applications properties or application.yml file to configure your application. These files allows you to externalize configuration, meaning you can change the behavior of your application without modify the code. Okay. So why are they useful? So you can configure things like database connection, server ports, logging levels, your email setting, like sending email using SMTP. Okay, you can configure things like database connection, server ports, logging levels. Make your application more flexible and easier to manage. Okay, so let's explore the next topic, like how Spring Boot works. Okay, every Spring Boot application has a main class. Okay, every Spring Boot application has a main class annotated with Spring Boot application @ Spring Boot application. This annotation combines like configuration that marks the class as a configuration class, and enable auto configuration enables auto configuration it, and next is the component scan for components, services, and repositories. Okay, so the next is dependency injection. Spring Boot uses the Spring Framework's dependency injection to manage beans and their dependencies. Okay, so the dependency injection DI is a design pattern that implements inversions of control principles for resolving dependencies. It's allow a program to remove hard-coded dependencies so that the applications become loosely coupled, extendable. Running the When you run the main class, Spring Boot start the embedded server, loads the configuration and initialize the application context. Okay. So like some advantage of Spring Boot is repair development. Means Spring Boot reduce development time by providing defaults and auto configuration. So it's microservices friendly, means API friendly. Spring Boot is ideal for building microservices APIs due to its lightweight nature and embedded server support, like Tomcat server. And it's also have a huge community support. Spring Boot has a large and active community, making it easy to find resource and solutions. Okay. And applications built with Spring Boot are highly scalable and can be developed in cloud environments. Okay, Spring Boot provides extensive support for testing with tools like JUnit, Mockito, and Spring Test. Okay, so the next question is when to use Spring Boot. Like when you want to build microservice or standalone applications, like when you want to make some RESTful APIs, when you use to Spring Boot. when you need repage development with minimal configuration, and when you want to leverage the Spring ecosystem with ISA. Okay, so overall, like the Spring Boot is a powerful framework that simplifies Java application development. Its key features like auto configuration, embedded services, and production-ready tools make it a top choice for modern developers. Whatever you are building a small REST API or a complex microservices. Okay. Architecture Spring Boot provides the tools and features to get the job done efficiently. Okay, so the next topic is Spring MVC. Okay, the Spring Boot is, I I was give you a explanation about the Spring Boot. So now come on the Spring MVC. Okay, so learn the Spring MVC tutorial for beginners with the example in Ellipse Online. We explained every topics with appropriate example. We are providing Spring Boot MVC framework tutorials step by steps in Ellipse for Spring MVC framework. Spring MVC configure file, Spring MVC hello world, Spring MVC multiple controller, Spring MVC login, Spring MVC for form handling, Spring MVC exception handling are more. Mhm. Okay, so like Spring MVC means model view and controller is a module for the Spring framework used for building web applications. It follows the MVC design pattern. Okay, MVC means model. Model it represent for encapsulate the application data. Okay, like tables properties. Okay, the class name is the our table in the MySQL and SQL, and view means it represent for rendering the model data where you make the HTML code, UI code. Controller it represent for receiving the user request, building model object and passing the model object of the view. Here you write your business logics and other codes. Like here you write the backend code. Okay. With so it's follow the MVC design pattern which separates the applications into three main components: model, view, and controller. The separation makes the application easier to manage, test, and scan. Below, I will explain you what Spring MVC is, how it works, and how each of its components does in detail. So next is the what is MVC? MVC is a framework for building web applications. in Java. It is a part of the larger Spring framework and is designed to handle HTTP request, process them, and return response to the client. It is widely used for building dynamic web pages, RESTful web services, form-based applications. Okay, so why we use the Spring MVC? Spring MVC provides a clean and flexible way to build a web application. Some of its key benefits include are like separation of concurrence. So like the MVC pattern separates the application into three components, model, view, and controller, making it easier to manage and maintain. So and it's provide the flexibility. Spring Boot is highly configurable and integrates seamlessly with other Spring modules like Spring Security, Spring Data, etc. And it's also have capability for testability. The separation of components make it easy to write unit test for controllers, services, and other layers. Support for REST API like Spring MVC provides built-in support for building RESTful web services. Okay, so some core components of Spring MVC and their roles is like so first we talk about the model. Okay, so the model represents the data of application. It is responsible for meaning the application's data, logic, and rules. Okay, so it's is it yeah it is useful. It holds the data that is displayed in the view. It interacts with the database or other data resource to fetch or update data. So, for example, in a web application, the model could be a Java object, means POJO. Okay, that represent a user, product, or any other entity. Okay, so the next is the view. Okay, next is the view. So the view is responsible for rendering the data from the model to the user. Okay, the view is responsible for the rendering data from the model to the user. It is the presential layer of the application. Okay, so the view is also called as presentation layer of application. It defines how to data is displayed to the user. Like example, HTML format, JSON format, XML format. Okay, it's defined how the data is displayed in the user. It separates the presentation logic from the business logic. For the example, a JSP like Java server pages files that displays a list of products. Okay, the Thymeleaf templates that renders an HTML pages, and so the next is the controller. Okay, So what is controller? Let's explain. Let's explore it. The controller is the central component that handles user requests, process them, and returns the appropriate response. It acts as an intermediary between the model and the view. Why is it useful that it's a handle user input? Like example, for the example, form submitting URL request. Okay, like it's a handle user input. It's interact with the model to fetch or update data. It select the appropriate view to render the response. Okay, so next is the what is the dispatch servlet? Servlet. Okay, so dispatch servlet is the core of Spring MVC. It is a front controller that handles all incoming HTTP requests and delegates them to the appropriate controllers. Okay, it centralizes the request handling and routing. It integrates with other Spring components like handlers, view, resolvers, and exception handlers. The dispatch servlets receive an HTTP request. It's consult the handler mapping to determine which controller should handle the request. And the controller processes the request and returns a model and a view name. Okay. So the dispatch servlet used the view resolver to find the actual view like JSP and Thymeleaf. Okay. The view renders response and send it back to the client. Okay, so the next is the handler mapping. Okay, so handler mapping is responsible for mapping incoming HTTP request to the appropriate controller method. Okay, it determines which controller method should handle a specific request based on the URL or other criteria. For example, like a request to product or a students is mapped to the get students method in the product in the student controller. Okay, to a request to students is mapped to the get students method in the student controllers. There is the model class. No, no, this is not the model class. Okay, so next is the view resolver. View resolver is responsible for resolving the view name returned by the controller into an actual view like JSP, Thymeleaf. Okay. Why is it useful that it's decoupled that controller from the view, making it easier to change the view technology without modifying the controller. Okay, so for the example, a view name is like product list is resolved to a JSP file located at web.inp views product list.jsp. Okay, so the next is the data binding and validations. Okay, so data binding is the process of mapping user inputs, example form data, to Java object. Okay, data binding is the process of mapping user input to Java objects. Java objects means model, and user input means data. So it simplifies the process of handling user inputs and updating the model. Okay. So validation ensure that the user input meet certain criteria. Uh, like example for the required field, validate email format. Okay. How Spring MVC work? Like client send a request means that a client means the browser sends the HTTP request to the server, okay, and dispatch servlet receives the request, like the dispatch servlet acts as the form controller and receives the request, and next is the handler mapping. The dispatch servlet consult the handler mapping to determine which controller should handle the request. Okay, in a single project, you have multiple controllers and multiple models. Okay, and multiple views. Controller process the request like the controller process the request and interact with the model and return a model and view name. Okay. The view resolver, the dispatch servlet use the view resolver to find the actual view, and view renders the response, like the view renders the response HTML, JSON, and send it back to the client. Okay, so advantage of Spring MVC is that separation of concurrence. The MVC pattern separates the application into three components, making it easier to manage and maintain. It's also provide flexibility. Spring MVC is highly configurable and support multiple use technologies. For the example, JSP, Thymeleaf, FrameMaker. Okay, integration with Spring ecosystem. So Spring obviously integrates seamlessly with other Spring modules like Spring Security, Spring Data, etc. Okay, and it's also provide a feature like testing. The separation of components makes it easy to write a unit test for controllers, services, and other layers. Okay, support for REST like Spring MVC provides built-in support for building RESTful web services. When to use Spring MVC, that's when you want to build a dynamic web app web application. When you need a clean separation of concurrents like model, view, and controller. When you want to integrate with other Spring modules like Spring Security, Spring Data, etc. When you need to build RESTful web services, then you use the Spring MVCs. So Spring MVC is a powerful framework for building web applications in Java. Its use of the MVC pattern along with its flexibility and integration with the Spring ecosystem make it for developers. Whether you are building a simple web pages for a complex RESTful API, Spring MVC provides the tools and features to get the job done efficiently. The introduction about the Spring Boot and the Spring MVC. So let's start the next. Wait a minute, okay? Okay, so let's today I will explain you about the some MVC. So let's open the SQL server and write some queries and make a database and create some things and finish them it today for today's. Okay, so SQL is a structured query language. It stands standard language. So using communities with database. Okay, it's allow users to create, read, update, and delete data from a database. These operations are commonly referenced as CRUD operation. And here I have some many. Okay, so SQL is so why use we SQL means that It's easily manageable large amounts of data, retrieve specific information from the database, and universal standard used in all major relation database system like MySQL, SQL Server, Oracle, PostgreSQL, etc. efficiently handles complex queries and large datasets efficiently. Okay? So some SQL commands like DDL, DML, DQL, DCL, TCL, etc. Okay, so used to define and modify the structure of data. First, we create a database. Okay, create database like um, okay, employee DB. Wait a minute. There is our database. Okay, so create a table. Create table. Employees ID int primary key identity one name where care and set the limits for the name like 15 characters and defines not null. Okay, int sorry, age int not null. Create date time not null. Default get date. Okay. Salary int not null. Default $5,000. Okay, so create the table. Yeah, refresh it. Okay, so this is our table. Now our table is empty. Okay, so insert some data in this table. Okay, so we use the insert query to add new data into the table. Okay, insert into name, age, salary. Okay, in the insert into field, you set the column names, and in the values, get the values like name, to guess, age is 29, the salary is 18,000. Okay, we have some errors because we get the some syntax error. Oh, sorry, I forget the include table name. Okay, okay, so write a select query, select a star from the employees. Okay, so there is the data. So, okay, ID, name, is a salary and created. So when we insert the data, we cannot define the ID and the created, but it picked up automatically because of when we create our table, then we use it. Identify one column one. It means it increment the integer value one by one, one plus one. Okay, and so it has a primary key, so it cannot repeat this value again. Okay, if we delete the id one, then we cannot get the again id. We cannot get again id, this id, same id. Okay, and the create date. When we create a row data, then it's pick up a default date. So date dot now. eh, This function when we create some data in table and cannot provide the create date, so it's get the current date of our PC by default. Okay, and set it. So insert some different types of data like user one. Okay, so this is our all data. Okay, so this is the select query using applying the filters. Okay, I found, okay, I said the select start from query. So select start from employees. So give me employees where ID is 5. Okay, then I again only this. Then I get this data. Okay, I said it where salary is equal to 20,000 and execute it. That's and the salary greater than 25,000. Okay, we get the 3 employees and greater than equal to, then we execute, then we get the 4 users. Okay, so now I want to update the column. Means I want to add a new column in this existing table like email for the email. Okay. Mm, like I must be used to alter statements. So use to modify the structure of existing table using alter. Like alter table name, date, column name, email where in okay not null and okay not null, so execute it. So it's given an error because we define here not null, but existing still we have some data. So alter table only allows columns to be added that cannot nulls or have a default definition specific or a column being added in or database without any. So set a default email, default variable default at the rate gmail.com and edit. Okay, so we add successfully. Okay, so here we add a field, added a field in our database. Okay, so this adds a new column email to the employee table. Okay, so I want to update an existing data in the table where so okay, so I want to change the salary. Okay, so first I use the update command. Okay, used to modify existing data in a table using update, like update set age. No, yeah, I also change the age. Set age 34 and salary equal to 1000, where ID equal to 6. Okay, let's execute it. Okay, and okay, see, it's change the age and change the salary also. Okay, and here okay. Okay, this updates the age and the salary of the employees with the ID 6. Okay, so this is the select query. Okay, I forget about to explain it. sorry. So used to retrieve data from a table. Okay. So this retrieve all counts rows from the student tables, and we also apply filters like ages, salaries. This retrieves name and salaries. Those age is greater than 35, etc. Okay, we also use the delete query for the delete the data. Okay, so like delete from employees where ID is 1. Now where ID is 3. Okay, so delete it and retrieve the data. So here we have an ID 1, 2 and direct 4. We don't have the ID the 3 because we delete it. Okay. So SQL is the case insensitive, but it's a good practice to write keywords like in upper cases, okay, where case is used to filter and data based on a condition. Okay, so we also use the order by to sort data. Example, for the example, ascending and descending orders, and the group by is used to group rows based on a column, often used with aggregation functions like sum, count. Okay, so we also have the rollback and grind function. Okay, so in the DCML commands used to give access permissions to user like grant, select, insert on student on employees from. I think it's given. Okay, so the grant is cannot support in SQL. It support only MySQL, and we don't have the user one. Mhm. Okay, and reverse changes made during the transaction for the using the rollback. Okay. Yeah, because there is no corruption being and permission cannot execute it, so that's the rollback is not using. And the next is the drop command. Okay, delete command like when you delete the data, you must know you have where clause. Otherwise, you lost your all data. Means if you execute only this query, then you lost your all the data like this. Okay. Now we don't have any data. Okay. So used to delete a database or a table. Example drop table and table name EMP LOY employee. Okay, drop table employee. Okay, dropped the table. So refresh this. So we don't show the over table. Drop database and database name employee DB. Okay. Cannot drop the database employee DB because it does not exist in your have permissions. Okay. Okay, so I manually delete it. It's the problem for the SQL server. Okay, not the thing. Okay, so today we cover about the some topics for the Spring Boot and Spring MVC and SQLs. So we finished the SQL. So in the next tutorial we learn about the data structure and some basics of MySQL. And then we covered MongoDB also. So W3 School is the best reference for practice all things like Java, MySQL, SQL. Okay, but it don't have MongoDB. Yeah, the SQL cannot have MongoDB. Okay, so the interviewer widely ask the questions from the SQL queries like SQL joins, SQL unions, inner join, let join. Okay, the joins are very important in the database, and the interviewer always asks what is the foreign key, what is the primary key, and what is the secondary key, and what is joins, inner join, outer join, left, right joins, and unions. So make sure you prepared it. and I will also explain you about the joins in MySQL series. Okay. So there is some aggregation functions like a minimum for the return the smallest value within the selected columns, and max is the returns the largest values within the select columns, and count returns the number of the rows in the set, return the total sum of the numerical columns, average return the average of the values of the numerical columns. Aggregation functions ignore null values except for counts. Okay, so you can explore and try it for your best practice when you doing by yourself. Then you understand everything like what is the aggregation functions, what is joins, and how to use it. Okay, when you use it, then you get it is simplified. Okay, so let's end the session. Really? So today's session is end. We meet the next class tomorrow. Okay, bye bye. Hello, I'm audible. Really?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah, okay. So bye bye. We meet
Mm,
in next.
yeah,
Yeah.
bye.
Yeah, bye.